She said it was just one night with her CEO. A career move, nothing personal, just business, just networking, just what everyone does to get ahead. I said, okay. The next morning, her CEO was screaming, "The merger's over. Who is your husband?" That's when she realized what I'd done. That's when she understood that my silence wasn't acceptance, it was calculation. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where my viewers are joining from around the world. This is a story about ambition, about betrayal disguised as opportunity, and about what happens when the quiet person in the room turns out to be the most dangerous one there. It was a Thursday evening in late October, the kind of evening where the city lights outside your window make everything feel cinematic, significant, like you're living in a movie where something important is about to happen. I was sitting in our modern downtown apartment, laptop open on the dining table, reviewing documents for a client presentation the next morning. My name is David. I'm 39 years old, a strategic consultant specializing in corporate mergers and acquisitions. I've spent 15 years learning how companies work, how deals get made, how power moves through boardrooms and back channels. I'm good at my job because I'm patient, analytical, and I never let emotions cloud my judgment. Or at least, I didn't used to. My wife, Lena, 34, ambitious, brilliant, came home around 8 p.m. Later than usual, but not unusually late. She worked as a senior analyst at Caldwell Industries, a mid-sized tech firm that had been making waves in the industry for the past 2 years. She'd been there since the beginning, had worked her way up from junior analyst to one of the CEO's trusted advisors. But that evening, something was different. She stood in the doorway for a moment, briefcase in hand, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, nervous, determined, guilty, some combination of all three. "We need to talk," she said, setting down her bag. Those 4 words, the ones that always precede something life-changing. I closed my laptop and gave her my full attention. "Okay," I said calmly. "What's going on?" She poured herself a glass of wine, unusual for a weeknight, and sat down across from me at our dining table. The same table where we'd shared countless meals, where we'd made plans for the future, where we'd celebrated promotions and anniversaries and small victories. "There's a situation at work," she started, not meeting my eyes. "With the merger." I knew about the merger. Everyone in our industry knew about it. Caldwell Industries was in final negotiations to be acquired by Zenith Corp., a much larger company. It was a massive deal. $200 million, hundreds of jobs on the line, the kind of merger that makes or breaks careers. "What kind of situation?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. She took a long drink of wine. "Mr. Callahan, my CEO, he's under a lot of pressure right now. The board is nervous. The Zenith executives are demanding. There are complications with the due diligence process. Complications. Issues with some of the financial projections. Nothing major, but enough to make people nervous. Enough to potentially stall the deal." I nodded slowly. "And?" She finally looked at me. "He asked me to help smooth things over, to attend a dinner meeting tonight with him and one of the key Zenith board members. At the Regency Hotel, just the 3 of us." Something cold settled in my stomach. "A dinner meeting at a hotel? It's not what you think." "Then what is it, Lena?" She set down her wine glass with slightly shaking hands. "David, don't be dramatic. It's just one night. He's my CEO. This will help the merger go through. It'll secure my position at the new company. It'll secure our future. Everyone does this kind of thing. It's how business works at this level." The silence that followed was deafening. I stared at her, at this woman I'd been married to for 6 years, at the person I'd built a life with, bought this apartment with, planned a future with, and I tried to process what she was actually saying. "You're telling me," I said slowly, carefully, "that your CEO wants you to sleep with someone to close a business deal, and you're asking for my permission." "I'm not asking for permission," she said defensively. "I'm telling you what I have to do, for us, for our financial security. David, if this merger doesn't go through, I could lose my job. We could lose everything we've built." "So, your solution is prostitution." She flinched. "Don't call it that. It's networking. It's relationship building. It's betrayal," I finished quietly. "It's betrayal disguised as ambition." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I thought you'd understand. You work in this world. You know how it operates. You know that sometimes you have to make sacrifices." I sat there for a long moment, feeling something fundamental shift inside me, something breaking and hardening at the same time, Then I said, very calmly, "Okay." She blinked. "Okay, that's it?" "You do what you think you have to," I said, my voice eerily steady. "I'll do the same." She stared at me, confused. "What does that mean?" "It means I understand. You have your priorities, I have mine. You make your choices, I'll make mine." She stood up, grabbed her purse, still looking uncertain. "David, are we okay?" I looked at her for a long moment. At the woman who'd just told me she was going to sleep with someone else for a promotion, who'd framed betrayal as career strategy, who'd expected me to understand, to accept, to enable. "We're exactly what we need to be," I said. She didn't understand what that meant. She thought my silence meant surrender. She thought my calm meant acceptance. She thought okay meant I was weak, complacent, willing to be walked over for the sake of her career. She didn't realize it was the calm before her storm. I'd think later, watching everything unfold exactly as I'd planned. She didn't realize that when I said okay, I wasn't agreeing to her plan. I was implementing mine. She left the apartment around 8:30, dressed in the outfit she'd carefully chosen. Professional but alluring, expensive but not obvious. I watched her go, heard the door close behind her, and sat in the silence of our apartment for exactly 5 minutes. Then I opened my laptop and got to work. Here's what Lena didn't know about my job. Here's what she'd never bothered to ask about in detail. Too focused on her own career trajectory to pay attention to the specifics of mine. Too busy networking and climbing and positioning herself to notice what her husband actually did for a living. I wasn't just any strategic consultant. I wasn't one of dozens of analysts reviewing spreadsheets and making PowerPoint presentations. I was the strategic consultant that Zenith Corp had hired 6 months ago to conduct the comprehensive due diligence review on Caldwell Industries. I was the person analyzing their financials, their operations, their corporate culture, their leadership structure. I was the one who would ultimately recommend whether this $200 million merger should proceed or collapse. And I'd been working on this case for 3 months of intensive investigation. During those 3 months, I discovered some very interesting things about Lena's beloved CEO, Mr. Richard Callahan. Things that went far beyond creative accounting or aggressive financial projections or the kind of minor irregularities you find in any mid-sized company trying to look attractive to a larger acquirer. Richard Callahan, 47 years old, charismatic, ruthless, Yale MBA, former investment banker, was systematically defrauding his own company and everyone associated with it. Let me be specific. Because specificity matters. Because when you're building a case that will destroy someone's empire, you need to be precise. Financial fraud. Category 1. Earnings manipulation. Over the past 2 years, Callahan had been manipulating quarterly earnings reports to show consistent growth, revenue that didn't exist, customers that weren't real, contracts that were backdated or entirely fabricated. He'd created shell companies to purchase Caldwell products, making it look like business was booming, then quietly writing off those sales as bad debt in subsequent quarters after the headlines had been made. I had documentation of 47 separate instances of misrepresented earnings. I had the bank records showing money moving through shell corporations. I had emails from his CFO questioning the practices and Callahan's responses, threatening termination if anyone spoke up. Financial fraud. Category 2. Asset misappropriation. Callahan had diverted approximately $12 million in company funds over 3 years to personal accounts disguised as business expenses. Luxury cars registered to family members but purchased through company accounts. A vacation home in Aspen classified as a corporate retreat center. Private school tuition for his kids paid through a employee education benefit that only his family used. Country club memberships, art purchases, even his daughter's wedding had been partially funded through creative accounting. I had receipts, bank statements, invoices. The paper trail was extensive and damning. Financial fraud, Category 3. Metrics inflation tech companies live and collapse based on user growth metrics. Callahan had been systematically inflating Caldwell's user numbers by creating fake accounts, counting free trial users as paying customers, and misrepresenting engagement statistics. The company claimed 800,000 active users. My analysis suggested the real number was closer to 200,000. That's not rounding error. That's fraud. I had server logs, database queries, internal emails from engineers who'd questioned the numbers. Everything you'd need to prove systematic deception. Hidden liabilities. The company had approximately $8 million in liabilities that weren't properly disclosed in their financial statements. Pending lawsuits, warranty obligations, customer refunds, environmental remediation from an old facility. Callahan had buried all of it in footnotes and subsidiary accounts, hoping no one would dig deep enough to find them. I'd dug deep enough. But here's what made this case especially interesting. Here's what elevated it from routine corporate fraud to something more insidious. Employment violations. The pattern Richard Callahan had a pattern. A very specific, very documented pattern of using female employees as leverage in business negotiations. It had started small, encouraging attractive women to attend client dinners, to be friendly, to charm potential customers. But over time, it had evolved into something darker. I had testimony from 6 former female employees who'd left the company after refusing to participate in what Callahan called relationship building. Women who'd been promised promotions if they attended certain meetings. Women who'd been threatened with termination if they didn't cooperate. Women who'd been asked to do exactly what Lena was doing tonight, sacrifice their integrity for a business deal. 3 of those women had filed complaints with the EEOC but had accepted settlements and signed NDAs rather than pursuing formal litigation. I'd found those settlements, $150,000 each, paid from company discretionary funds, categorized as consulting fees. I had the paper trail, bank records showing payments, NDAs with suspicious clauses, email evidence of quid pro quo arrangements, hotel records that matched timelines of business deals closing, a pattern so clear that once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. And I had something else, something I'd discovered just last week while digging through Callahan's personal email account that his assistant had foolishly given me access to during document discovery. Tonight's meeting. The real story. Lena thought she was meeting with a Zenith board member. That's what Callahan had told her. But that was a lie. The person she was meeting tonight was Marcus Hendricks, a private equity investor who had no connection to Zenith at all. Callahan was trying to arrange a side deal, using insider information from the merger discussions to secure private investments in a new venture he was planning. He wanted to position himself to profit from the merger, fail, or succeed by having backup plans in place. And he was using Lena to seal that deal, not even for the merger, for his own personal financial scheme. I had emails proving it, calendar invitations with the real meeting purpose, financial projections for Callahan's planned new venture, everything. So when Lena came home tonight and told me what was happening, every piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I'd been conflicted for weeks about what to do with all this evidence, because exposing Callahan meant potentially destroying Lena's career. She worked for him. She was one of his senior team. She'd rise or fall with his company. If I exposed him, she'd be caught in the fallout, potentially losing her job, her reputation, maybe even facing legal liability if prosecutors decided to go after everyone in the executive suite. I'd been weighing my professional obligations against my personal relationship, trying to find a way to expose the fraud while protecting my wife, losing sleep over the ethics of it, the morality, the right choice. But then she'd come home tonight and solved my ethical dilemma for me. She'd chosen to participate in his corruption, actively, willingly. She'd framed betrayal as business necessity. She'd asked me to accept her sleeping with someone else so she could keep climbing a ladder built on exploitation and fraud. She'd revealed that her ambition mattered more than our marriage, more than her integrity, more than anything I thought we valued together. And in that moment, my path became crystal clear. I wasn't protecting a corrupt system anymore. I wasn't enabling her participation in fraud. I wasn't compromising my own integrity to shield someone who'd just shown me exactly who she was. I opened my secure laptop, the one I used for confidential client work, encrypted with military-grade security, air-gapped from regular networks. I pulled up the folder labeled Caldwell Confidential Findings. Inside were 3 months of meticulous investigation, thousands of pages of evidence, documentation that could destroy not just a company, but careers, reputations, futures. I sat back and looked at the screen, at the evidence that could destroy an empire, at the information that could end multiple careers, at the truth that would expose systematic corruption, and I thought about timing. Because in my business, timing is everything. I could have exposed this weeks ago, could have submitted my report to Zenith and let them make the decision, could have reported to regulators and let the investigation proceed at its normal, glacial pace. But that would have been messy, incomplete. There would have been time for Callahan to destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses, lawyer up, and create enough reasonable doubt to escape consequences. No, better to wait, to gather more evidence, to have everything absolutely ironclad, to time the revelation for maximum impact and minimum opportunity for the targets to escape. And now, thanks to Lena, I had the perfect trigger point. She thought she was helping him close the deal, I thought, fingers hovering over the keyboard, feeling a cold satisfaction settle over me. I was about to make sure he never opened one again. I made a list, carefully, methodically, the way I'd been trained to do, the way that had made me one of the most sought-after consultants in the industry. Phase 1, evidence distribution, tonight 11 p.m., 12:30 a.m., encrypted email to SEC Enforcement Division with full financial fraud documentation, confidential report to Zenith Corp executive team recommending immediate merger termination. Anonymous tip package to Wall Street Journal investigative team with supporting documents. Evidence package to Department of Labor Investigations Unit regarding employment violations. Notification to FBI White Collar Crimes Division regarding wire fraud and conspiracy. Anonymous submission to whistleblower protection organizations. Document dump to 3 separate investigative journalism platforms. Notification to Caldwell Industries minority shareholders through their legal counsel. Phase 2, media release, tomorrow, 6 a.m. Scheduled press release from Concerned Employees Coordination Group, already established, just waiting for my signal. Comprehensive document release to financial media outlets, social media exposure through multiple anonymous accounts created weeks ago. Notification to Caldwell Industries board members from anonymous source. Alert to competitive intelligence firms monitoring the merger. Release of sanitized evidence to business ethics watchdog organizations. Phase 3, legal actions, tomorrow, 9 a.m. Class action lawsuit filing by former employees, already prepared by lawyers, just waiting for evidence release to trigger. Emergency board meeting request from minority shareholders. Merger review suspension request to federal regulatory agencies. Formal ethics complaints to relevant professional organizations. Request for injunctive relief to prevent document destruction. Phase 4. Follow-up, tomorrow afternoon. Anonymous tips to local news stations for human interest angle, notification to tech industry publications for sector-wide coverage, evidence sharing with academic researchers studying corporate fraud, coordination with former employee support groups. It was ruthless. It was comprehensive. It was exactly the kind of strategic, multi-layered plan I got paid 6 figures to create for my clients when they needed to navigate complex corporate situations. Except this time, I wasn't getting paid. This time, it was personal. But that didn't make it wrong. If anything, it made it more important to do it right, to be thorough, to make sure there was no escape route, no way to minimize or spin or lawyer away from the truth. I was going to end Richard Callahan's career. I was going to destroy his company. I was going to expose systematic corruption that had been hiding in plain sight for years. And I was going to do it with such precision, such overwhelming evidence, such perfect timing that there would be no question about guilt, no ambiguity, no room for doubt. Some people might call that revenge. I called it justice. She thought my silence meant surrender, I thought, beginning to execute Phase 1. She didn't realize it was the calm before her storm. At 9:47 p.m., my phone buzzed with the notification I'd been simultaneously dreading and expecting. A text from Lena. At the hotel. This is harder than I thought. But I'm doing this for us. For our future. I love you. I stared at that message for a long time. At those 3 words at the end. I love you. The words that were supposed to mean something. The words that were supposed to carry weight, to represent commitment, to signify that we were partners in all things. She was typing those words while preparing to sleep with someone else, while sitting in a hotel room with another man, while making the final decision to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and she thought those 3 words would make it okay, would absolve her, would keep us intact. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say, nothing that would matter. Instead, I opened my email client and started executing Phase 1 of the plan I'd spent the past 3 hours refining. Email 101. 2. SEC Enforcement Division, Financial Fraud Unit. Subject urgent, securities fraud at Caldwell Industries, Inc., sent 11:03 p.m. to whom it may concern. I am submitting evidence of systematic securities fraud at Caldwell Industries, currently in advanced merger negotiations with Zenith Corp. As a confidential whistleblower with direct access to company records through legitimate due diligence processes, I am providing comprehensive documentation of the following violations. 1. Systematic earnings manipulation over 24-month period. Documented instances attached. 2. Falsified user growth metrics constituting material misrepresentation. 3. Undisclosed liabilities totaling approximately 8 malware. 4. Misappropriation of corporate funds for personal use. 5. Insider trading preparation related to pending merger. This matter requires immediate investigation as the pending merger represents significant risk to investors, employees, and market integrity. Time sensitive due to imminent deal closure. All supporting documentation attached. Source identity protected under whistleblower statutes. Additional evidence available upon request. Respectfully. Confidential source, Nerva 4477. 45 attachments. Financial statements, bank records, email correspondence, expert analysis, timeline documentation. Email F2. 2. Zenith Corp. Executive Team. Subject urgent, confidential, Caldwell due diligence, final report, recommend immediate termination, Zent. 11:17 p.m. James Morrison, CEO, CC. Board of Directors, General Counsel, CFO. This is David Chen, lead consultant on the Caldwell Industries acquisition due diligence. I am submitting my final report 72 hours ahead of the contracted schedule due to discovery of material fraud that fundamentally undermines the acquisition thesis and presents significant legal and financial risk to Zenith Corp. Executive summary. Caldwell financials are systematically fraudulent, user metrics inflated by approximately 300%, hidden liabilities exceed $8 million, CEO engaged in systematic securities fraud and employment law violations. Merger completion would expose Zenith to significant regulatory and legal liability. Recommendation. Immediate suspension of all merger negotiations. Formal notification to regulators required under securities law. Preservation of all communications for potential litigation. I am available for emergency conference call at your earliest convenience. This matter requires immediate executive attention. Full analysis and supporting documentation attached. David Chen, Senior Strategic Consultant. 87 attachments, comprehensive analysis, supporting evidence, legal memoranda, regulatory compliance documentation. Email for 3. 2. Wall Street Journal, Business Investigations Desk. Subject anonymous tip, major corporate fraud, time sensitive, sent 11:34 p.m. To the investigative team, I am providing evidence of systematic corporate fraud at Caldwell Industries, a mid-sized tech firm currently in merger negotiations with Zenith Corp. This story is breaking within hours through regulatory channels. First mover advantage available to news organization that acts quickly. Key elements: $200 million merger based on fraudulent financials, CEO systematically defrauding investors and employees, pattern of employment law violations. Multiple government agencies will announce investigations by tomorrow morning, all documentation attached. Multiple sources can confirm. This is a major story with significant industry implications. Anonymous source, secure contact information provided for verification, 34 attachments, sanitized but comprehensive evidence package. I sent 12 more emails over the next 90 minutes, each one carefully crafted, each one targeting a specific audience with precisely the information they needed to take action, each one timed to create maximum cascading effect. To the Department of Labor, employment law violations. To the FBI, wire fraud and conspiracy evidence. To minority shareholders' legal counsel, grounds for derivative lawsuit. To former employees, validation of their complaints and evidence for legal action. To industry watchdog organizations, pattern of corporate misconduct. To investigative journalists at 3 different publications, different angles on the same story. To academic researchers, case study in corporate fraud detection. By 12:30 a.m., I'd finished Phase 1. The evidence was out there, disseminating through multiple systems simultaneously. Regulators were receiving formal complaints. Lawyers were reviewing grounds for legal action. Journalists were beginning preliminary investigation. Shareholders were being notified of potential fraud. The machine was in motion, unstoppable now. At 12:47 a.m., another text from Lena arrived. It's done. Coming home soon. Please don't be upset. This was necessary for both of us. I'll make it up to you, I promise. I read that message 3 times. I'll make it up to you. Like this was something that could be balanced out. Like betrayal had an exchange rate. Like you could sleep with your boss and then somehow compensate your husband enough to make it okay. The delusion was almost impressive. I didn't respond to that message either. Just set the phone down and began Phase 2 preparation, scheduling the media releases for 6:00 a.m., setting up automated posts across multiple platforms, coordinating timing so everything would hit simultaneously, creating an overwhelming wave of information that couldn't be suppressed or spun. Then I did something I hadn't expected to do. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, good whiskey, the kind we'd been saving for a special occasion, and sat in the darkness of our living room, looking out at the city lights, thinking about what tomorrow would bring: chaos, destruction, the end of careers and companies and carefully constructed lies. And I felt peaceful, not happy, not satisfied exactly, but calm, clear, like I'd been carrying a weight for months and was finally about to set it down. She thought I'd heal in silence, I thought, sipping the whiskey, feeling it burn. She thought I'd process my hurt quietly, alone, while she climbed her ladder and advanced her career and sacrificed our marriage on the altar of her ambition. I looked at my phone, at the scheduled posts ready to launch in 6 hours, at the evidence packages already being reviewed by people with power to act, at the careful, methodical destruction I'd engineered. She didn't realize I was just waiting for the wound to close before cutting deeper. Meanwhile, across town in a luxury hotel suite, Richard Callahan was messaging his board of directors, his executive team, his inner circle. Everything's in the bag. Meeting went even better than expected. I'll seal the final details tomorrow. Merger closes by end of week. Start planning the celebration and your bonus structures. We're about to be very rich. He had no idea that his empire was already crumbling, that tomorrow morning his world would explode in spectacular fashion, that the woman he'd just coerced into his bed was married to the man who'd been documenting his crimes for 3 months, that his hubris, his pattern of exploitation, his systematic corruption was about to become front-page news. I finished my whiskey, rinsed the glass, set it in the dishwasher, went through the motions of normal domestic life while orchestrating the destruction of a company. Then I went to bed in our guest room. I'd moved my things there earlier in the evening, no longer able to sleep in the bed Lena and I had shared, and surprisingly, slept perfectly well. The sleep of someone who knows he's done the right thing, the sleep of someone who's been carrying a moral weight and is finally about to release it. The sleep of someone who understands that justice, even when it's personal, is still justice. He thought power came from secrets, I'd think the next morning, watching the news coverage begin. From intimidation and exploitation and keeping people silent through fear or complicity or NDAs. I closed my eyes and let sleep come. I preferred transparency. My alarm went off at 5:30 a.m. I got up, made coffee, opened my laptop, and watched the chaos begin. At exactly 6 a.m., the scheduled media release hit every major business news platform simultaneously. Breaking: Caldwell Industries CEO under investigation for securities fraud. Merger with Zenith Corp in jeopardy. By 6:15 a.m., the story was trending on financial Twitter. By 6:30 a.m., the Wall Street Journal had published a detailed exposé. They'd been working on it for months, apparently, just waiting for the right trigger. My evidence dump had given them everything they needed. By 7 a.m., Caldwell's stock had been halted due to volatility. Trading suspended pending disclosure. I sipped my coffee and watched it all unfold with a calm satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. Lena came home around 6:30 a.m. I heard her key in the lock, heard her trying to be quiet, probably assuming I was still asleep. She crept into the apartment, looked exhausted and ashamed and relieved it was over. Then she saw me sitting at the dining table, laptop open, watching the financial news. "David, you're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I said calmly. "Interesting news this morning. Have you checked your phone?" She frowned, pulled out her phone, and I watched her face change as she saw the notifications. Dozens of them. Hundreds, emails, texts, news alerts. Her face went pale. "Oh my God, what is this?" "An investigation," I said simply. "Into your CEO, for fraud. Looks like the merger's falling apart." She sat down heavily, scrolling through her phone with shaking hands. "This can't be happening. This can't be real. Last night was supposed to save the merger?" I finished. "Yeah, about that." At Caldwell Industries headquarters, chaos erupted at 7:30 a.m. when Richard Callahan arrived at the office. His executive assistant met him at the elevator, face white. "Sir, we have a situation. The board has called an emergency meeting. The SEC is requesting documents. Investors are calling. The press is outside." Callahan's confidence evaporated. "What? What are you talking about?" He got to his office to find 3 board members already there, looking grim. "Richard, we need to talk. Now." What followed was 3 hours of the most savage corporate destruction I've ever orchestrated, and I watched it all unfold through real-time news updates, through contacts at Zenith who were texting me updates, through the financial news channels playing on our TV. The SEC opened a formal investigation at 8 a.m. 3 major investors pulled their funding at 8:30 a.m. Zenith Corp issued a statement at 9 a.m. In light of recent revelations, we are suspending all merger negotiations with Caldwell Industries pending review of material disclosures. The Department of Labor announced an investigation into employment practices at 9:30 a.m., and at 10:15 a.m., according to my contact inside the company, Richard Callahan stormed into a conference room where his senior staff had gathered, looking panicked and furious, and screamed, "The merger's over. Everything's falling apart. Someone leaked everything. Who did this? Who is your husband?" He was looking directly at Lena when he said it, because he'd just been informed that the encrypted emails to the SEC, to Zenith, to the journalists, they'd all come from an IP address that traced back to David Chen, strategic consultant, who happened to be married to Lena Chen, one of his senior analysts. In that moment, Lena realized. She understood. She finally saw what I'd done while she was at that hotel, while she was making her sacrifice for her career. According to the person who told me about it later, she just stood there, frozen, as Callahan realized the connection, as he understood that he'd orchestrated his own destruction by pressuring the wife of the man who'd been investigating him. The irony was beautiful. Lena came home at 2 p.m. The office had shut down. Everyone had been sent home. The building was swarming with federal agents executing search warrants. She walked through the door looking like she'd aged 10 years in a day, pale, shaking, makeup streaked from crying, hair disheveled. She dropped her bag and stared at me. I was sitting calmly at the dining table, laptop still open, watching the news coverage. "David," she said, her voice hollow, "what did you do?" I looked up at her. "I submitted my due diligence report. That's my job." "You knew. You knew about all of this, about the fraud, about the investigation, about everything?" "Yes." "How long?" 3 months. I've been the lead consultant on the Zenith due diligence team since July." She sank into a chair, staring at me in disbelief. "You never told me." "You never asked. You were so focused on your career, on your CEO, on climbing the ladder. You never once asked what I was working on." But you knew. Last night, when I told you about the meeting, you knew what it really was. You knew he was using me." "Yes." "And you let me go anyway." I closed my laptop and looked at her directly. "You made a choice, Lena. You chose your career over our marriage. You chose to participate in corruption because you thought it would benefit you. I didn't make you do that. I just made sure there were consequences." She started crying. "You ruined everything. My career is over. The company is finished. I'll never work in this industry again." "Good," I said calmly. "Maybe you'll find an industry where success doesn't require compromising your integrity." "How can you be so cold?" she sobbed. "How can you sit there like this is nothing?" "Because it's not nothing. It's justice." "You want to know what's cold, Lena? Telling your husband you're going to sleep with someone else for a promotion and expecting him to understand? That's cold." She looked at me with a mixture of horror and realization. "You planned this. You waited until I gave you the perfect opportunity, and then you destroyed everything." "No, Lena. You did that when you chose ambition over loyalty. I just made sure integrity mattered again." She stood up, grabbed her bag. "I can't stay here. I can't look at you." "That's fine. I already packed your things. They're in the guest room. I suggest you find somewhere else to stay while we figure out the next steps." She stared at me. "The next steps? You mean divorce?" "Yes, I mean divorce." "You're serious. You're actually ending our marriage over this." I stood up and walked closer to her, close enough that she had to look me in the eye. "You ended our marriage the moment you walked out that door last night. I'm just making it official. But Lena, I want you to understand something. This isn't about revenge. This isn't about hurting you. This is about consequences. You made choices. Those choices had results. The fact that you're shocked by those results doesn't make them unfair. It just makes you naive." She was crying so hard she could barely speak. "People forget that choices have echoes," I said quietly. "Yours just came back louder than you expected." The next 72 hours were a masterclass in corporate collapse. Within days, the full scale of Richard Callahan's fraud became public. The SEC investigation expanded. The Department of Labor filed formal charges. The class action lawsuit by former employees moved forward with new momentum and new plaintiffs. Friday morning, Callahan resigned as CEO. By Friday afternoon, the board had voted to cooperate fully with all investigations in exchange for limited immunity. By Friday evening, Callahan had been arrested at his home on multiple counts of securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The merger with Zenith Corp was officially terminated. Caldwell Industries stock became essentially worthless. The company announced it would likely file for bankruptcy within weeks. And Lena, she lost everything she'd worked for. Her job, obviously. The company was imploding, but more than that, her reputation. Because while I'd kept her name out of the initial reports, someone at the company had leaked the connection. Leaked that Callahan had been caught partly because he'd pressured the wife of the investigator. Leaked that she'd been complicit. The industry is small. Word spreads fast. Within a week, everyone knew that Lena Chen had been willing to sleep her way into a promotion, that she'd participated in her CEO's corruption, that she'd been part of the scandal. She moved out of our apartment 3 days after the explosion, went to stay with her sister across town, sent me a text on Monday morning. "You planned this from the beginning. You knew exactly what would happen. You used me." I replied, "No, you just gave me the perfect timing. Everything I did was already in motion. You just helped me decide when to pull the trigger." She didn't respond. On Wednesday, she sent another text. "I hope you're happy. You destroyed everything. My career, my reputation, my future." I thought about replying, thought about explaining that I hadn't destroyed anything she hadn't destroyed herself, that consequences aren't the same as revenge, that justice isn't cruelty, but instead I just wrote, "Some lessons don't need revenge, they just need consequences." That was the last time we communicated directly. Everything else went through lawyers. 6 weeks later, I'm sitting in my new office. After the Caldwell scandal broke, my reputation in the industry skyrocketed. I became the consultant who'd exposed one of the biggest frauds in recent tech history, the one who'd been thorough enough to catch what everyone else had missed, the one willing to pull the trigger on a deal worth hundreds of millions when he found evidence of corruption. Zenith Corp offered me a permanent position as their head of due diligence. I accepted. Better salary, better title, and the satisfaction of knowing I'm now the gatekeeper for one of the largest tech companies in the world. My office has a view of the city, floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist design, a space that reflects who I've become. Clear, analytical, uncompromising. The news is playing quietly on the screen mounted to the wall. A follow-up story about the Caldwell scandal. Callahan faces up to 20 years in federal prison. The company has officially filed for bankruptcy. Former employees are receiving settlements. Industry experts say this case will change how mergers are evaluated for years to come. I smile faintly. My phone buzzes. A text from my lawyer. "Divorce finalized. Papers signed. You're officially single again? Congratulations, I guess." I set the phone down and look out at the city. At the life I'm building. At the future that's entirely mine now. She said it was just one night. Just business. Just what everyone does. I turned it into the end of an empire. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I believe that when someone shows you who they really are, when they're willing to betray you for a promotion, willing to compromise their integrity for a career move, willing to ask you to accept their corruption, you believe them, and you act accordingly. Some people think I went too far, that I destroyed her life over one mistake, that I should have forgiven her, should have understood the pressure she was under, should have been more compassionate. But those people don't understand something fundamental. This wasn't one mistake. It was a choice that revealed everything. Her priorities, her values, her willingness to sacrifice anything, including us, for her ambition. I didn't destroy her life. I just made sure her choices had consequences. There's a difference.